Recording in progress.
There it goes. Zoom is taking its sweet time today. Zoom and I, we're having a beef, everyone. We'll get into that. It'll be a famous, maybe we'll have it on social media, me and Zoom, if the AI takes over. And maybe it's because I'm not using the AI. That's what it is, Michael. I'm not using the AI note taker. It resents me for it. Welcome back to the Broken Brain, everybody. I am very excited to talk to my guest today. Is going to be talking about, we're talking about a new book called The Disciplined Listening Method by Michael Reddington. Michael is a certified forensic interviewer, and this book and the topic we're talking about today is a lot about, I really like this phrase I'm going to use from your book. It's how a certified forensic interviewer unlocks hidden value in every conversation, which, speaking from one of the things that I explored just on the show as an interviewer and working as a therapist, there is hidden things and depth that we find to, I think, every person. And we don't always assume that as we go through our lives and run into people, but that is the case. And what you describe here is some methods about that you call the disciplined listening method. And I'm excited to hopefully listen well to you tell us about it. So, Michael, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me here, man. I really appreciate it.
So tell everybody a little bit about what got you into this, and maybe even tell them for those who aren't familiar with what a forensic interviewer might be, and then how it led you to this kind of work.
I appreciate you asking. I'll keep a terribly long story short, and then I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions you have. I started out as a special education school teacher and baseball coach. Thought that would be what I would do. Ended up getting peer pressured into trying the financial industry, where found out it wasn't for me pretty quickly, although arguably not quickly enough. Went back to school to get my business degree, was juggling part-time jobs. One of them just happened to be in investigation. So one thing leads to another. I end up in a management role, and I end up having to have conversations with people who made regrettable decisions. And it was my job to encourage them to be honest about those decisions and to write it down in detail for me at the end of the conversation. And for me, I became immediately both curious and passionate about why people would be so honest. Like, why are they opening up in this situation and telling me the truth? Like, we can say, one door closes, another opens. This is a way for them to maybe no, let's be honest. Bad things are going to happen first. There's consequences. And then what they choose to do after those consequences is up to them.
Were you in law enforcement or private investigation?
I was in the private sector.
Okay. Yeah. But still, right. It's like, it doesn't do me any good to tell you. I mean, not immediately, right? My instinct should be, don't tell you what I did.
Yeah.
Right.
No, they absolutely should be. Because right now, you're most likely losing your job. And then whatever effects that has, right? You got to go home and tell your wife, your kids, can you pay your bills? Are you getting divorced? What's your ability to get another job going to be like? All of those things. And that's best case scenario. Depending on what it was, now you're going to jail. There's other things. If you are committing fraud with a group of people and now you have to see them in your neighborhood after, there's all kinds of very real consequences out there. And so that led me through a long road of research and education that on the investigative side culminated with earning my certified forensic interviewer designation that you asked about. And that is a designation of expertise. It's not a job in and of itself. So that would be like a certified or like a licensed marriage and family therapist or a certified public accountant. Like, it's a designation of expertise in and of itself. And really, the word forensic gets thrown around in different contexts. People, know it from the TV shows, but for all intents and purposes, the context that we use it in is for court. It doesn't mean that we're always going to end up in court. And quite honestly, if you do a great job, hopefully you never have to go to court. But it's the way that I like to describe it. And this is very much an unauthorized description from the International Association of Interviewers. But it is, if somebody's a certified forensic interviewer, they should be able to be blindfolded, rolled off the back of a truck, and wherever they stand up, be able to conduct a morally, legally, and ethically successful interview that is focused on building rapport in order to get the truth, whatever that truth may be. So that's my verbiage, not the officially licensed description of it. And so after earning that, I was recruited by a company, Wicklander Zalowski and Associates, to the world leader in non-confrontational interview and interrogation training and advising. So I worked with them for a decade. Traveling the world teaching these interrogation techniques and then conducting non-confrontational interrogations on a contract basis myself, basically a contract interrogator. during all of that is when I started to recognize the parallels between the conversations we were having in the investigative interview world and the conversations that people were having in the business world. And honestly, personal conversations, buying, selling, negotiating, all of these things. And so that relit my curiosity and passion for, wait a minute, where are the gaps? Like, where can the best practices and the research from both of these areas be overlapped to create this might be a cheesy analogy, but the brick and mortar to hold this whole thing together. So that led me down many more research and education paths that eventually culminated with writing the disciplined listening method that I appreciate you mentioning as we get started. And when we talk about uncovering hidden value in every conversation, it's so easy for people to fall into the check the box mentality or to fall prey to the expectations we might not even realize we have going into a conversation, or to let our judgments cloud what we see and what we hear and how we react. And so with the disciplined listening method, it is a collection of tools, techniques, and approaches to help us deepen our contextual awareness and connect with people at a level that helps us get that sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences in any of our high value conversations.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting where you mentioned one of the key parts of that is a rapport building, which in this case would have to be fairly quick rapport building because you're not spending a weekend hanging out with the person or whatever, and you're not their friend either. In fact, very much the opposite. You're investigating them, right? But to have a connection and from what I understand in interviewing, that's a more effective part. A lot of people think of interrogation as intimidation, or even in the movies we see, even like physical intimidation or aggression or I guess torture or something like that. But all of those things, from what I understand, are also not effective. If someone's scared, they're not likely to tell you the truth, as if they think that we're talking and we have some kind of, not friendship, but connection, right? Am I getting that?
Oh, you're nailing it. And so I'll start with the negative and circle back to the positive. You're right on all fronts. I mean, think about it this way. If you and I have never met before, you did something that you knew you weren't supposed to, and there could be some consequences attached, whatever that may be. And I basically sit in front of you and make it clear that I'm a better person than you are. And now you need to tell me everything that you did because you owe it to me based on the mistakes you made in your life. And here's what's going to happen if you don't. You're going to tell me to F off. And honestly, if you don't, I might think a little less of you. Like, now I've made it a zero-sum game, right? Well, if that's how you're going to treat me, here, no matter what happens to me next, here's how I win. Screw off. I'm not telling you anything. So now, even if I still lose my job, get arrested, go to jail, I can feel good about myself because based on how you treated me, I didn't give you what you were looking for. I win. So the rapport-based process, the rapport building process is critical. And there's really two answers here, which I think is true in a formal investigative interviewing setting, but also in any meeting. It could be a job candidate interview. It could be a client meeting. It could be a vendor negotiation. It could be, sitting down with your boss. It doesn't really matter, in one man's humble opinion. But yeah, you have that quick rapport building stage in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And there were multiple studies that came out of the FBI, people can take them for what they will, that said building rapport in many ways is the most important piece of investigative interviewing. And it's also the biggest mistake that investigators make when they either skip it or try too hard. Like you said, we come in here, we're not friends. That doesn't mean we can't be cool to each other, but we're not friends. So the harder I try to make it look like I'm your friend, the more you're like, yo, dude, where are you going with this? I don't trust you. You may as well get in my face. I'm not telling you anything.
I worked a lot with the court system. I worked with drug court and a lot of court-ordered addiction treatment programs. And it was interesting. It was kind of a well-known thing. People who had not been in the system very much would come in, the criminal justice system would come in and they'd talk about, well, they lied. They told me we're going to help you. And then all of a sudden they charged me with 3 more crimes because of the things I said. And everybody who were frequently interacting with it would say, oh yeah, no, they'll help you. They'll help you into a pair of handcuffs. They'll help you into the car. So there's the lying factor and the pushing that turns people off if they've been through it before too, which sets up for, I don't want to say that hopefully there's not a next time for most of us if we're ever in that situation, but so a lot of high stakes, you'd say the experience you bring of you develop these skills are much higher stakes than the situations that most readers who read this book are going to be in. And also they're also not, Well, I don't want to say not as high stakes. They're not trying probably to indict someone. They might even be building rapport with someone who they might become friends with.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah. That would be better. I mean, I'm sure investigators read it and they can apply it directly, but most of the examples in the book, there's some interrogation stories in there, of course, but they're really geared more towards business and personal conversations.
And that's what I like. Yeah, that's what I like about it. It's not just for investigators. It's for people who just talk to other people, which is most people.
Yeah, it's actually not for investigators. Like I'm a former investigator and I wrote it. So pardon my bias and make fun of me as you see fit. I would like to believe that investigators can get a lot from it, but it's written from an investigator's perspective for everyone else, so to speak. And when we talk about high stakes, high value, whatever you want to call it, for me, we judge the stakes or the value of a conversation based on two factors to oversimplify it: the outcomes that we can achieve and the value of the relationship. So for me, working with my young son on how to tie his shoes could be one of the highest stakes conversations I participate in that day because of all of the ripple effects that can come from that. So somebody might look at that, you're trying to teach a kid how to tie your shoes. That doesn't matter. Actually, that matters a whole lot. I've had times where I get, just a couple of weeks ago, I went on a client engagement. I get to Arizona and they don't have a hotel room for me, and it's during spring break, and they tell me that the hotel is sold out. I just flew all the way across the country. Now, the person I'm talking to, I don't have a relationship with. Like, if all goes well, I'm never going to see this person again. Right. But this is now a high impact conversation because I'm exhausted and I'd like to get into a hotel room, shower, and change before my dinner meeting. So we had to use all of the same techniques in order for me to get a room that night, even though they told me that it was sold out and there was nothing that they could do for me. So when we think about a high stakes situation, it's not necessarily an interrogation or $1 million sales meeting or a big negotiation. It's based on the outcomes we can achieve short and long term and the value of the relationship. How important is this conversation to us? One of those could be high. Both of those could be high. There's certainly a sliding scale for all of us. But in those conversations, then yes, using these disciplined listening skills creates some very real advantages for us when we prepare differently, when we observe differently, when we engage differently, when we build rapport, allow people to save face, ask questions in a way that go well beyond that, initial performative act of listening we've all been taught. I mean, I'm not saying don't do those things, but go beyond those things in order to get to information and emotions and intelligence and commitments that otherwise we might not have touched.
So that's right on. Where I'm interested in is when you get to that, what kinds of things are you carrying into that conversation then when you're like, looking to establish that rapport? And I love all the things you just kind of listed, but let's go into some of that, of what do you start to do?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And cut me off anytime, man. This is your show. Don't let me ranting away on you.
No, you're doing great. I'm just a lot of the interviews job is to come up with a different way of saying, keep going, please.
So I'll try not to put you in that spot too many times. So
no,
I'm going to go back to something.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of different words. It's more interesting, right?
Yeah, come on, a thesaurus just for that. Yes. I'll go back to something you said. They'll help you put the handcuffs on and get in the car and go to jail and spend a little bit longer there than you initially intended and have a harder time getting a job when you come out and all of those things. So for me, one of the things that I truly believe is critical for all of us is to embrace and relish the facts that people have more reason to distrust you than to trust you. Unless you have a long-standing relationship where we've given them consistent evidence over time that we are trustworthy from their perspective, not ours, they have more motivation to distrust us than to trust us. That's a fact of life, and we can use that to our advantage. The other one is if somebody else has information and we need it, the other people are in control of this conversation, not us. And that's not open to discussion because they're going to be the ones that choose what to say and when to say it. And to use your point again earlier, the more I try to force it out of them, the more it's like a reverse magnetic effect. I'm motivating them not to share it. So if I can go into whatever I think is a high impact, high stakes conversation and say, all right, well, realistically speaking, this person is going to be more motivated to withhold information than to share it. That's the human condition. It doesn't make them a bad person. And because I need this information from them, they're in control of this conversation, not me. Sweet. How do I use that to my advantage? And now from when I schedule it to where I schedule it to, am I the one? Is somebody else? How many people? Is it lunch? Are we going for a walk? Is it breakfast? Is it in a conference room? What am I wearing? All of these things play really important roles as we build rapport and make those early bonds.
Well, and it's interesting as you say that. I'm just thinking in my head about distrust in all of these examples you said, right? So if I go through, like, if I'm in a job interview, right? It's like if I'm interviewing to hire, I think, you're probably going to fudge. I'm at least assuming you might fudge the truth, and that I'm trying to figure out if you're going to be a good employee. As if I'm trying to get the job, I'm assuming that you're trying to hire somebody, and it's not necessarily me. And even like the hotel employee, it's like, if I give too much information to this potential customers can be nasty, and they're going to throw it in my face. Even my kid, like tying shoes, they're not necessarily not trusting because you said, like a long-term relationship, but they don't want to tie their shoes. They want to go play the video game or, go for, grab their toys or something or whatever. So yeah, there's a natural impulse, probably a lot of the time, for people to be like, I don't want to go where this is going necessarily.
Way more often than we think. And the number one reason is one that flies past most people's radar: embarrassment.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
So use my son and tying his shoes. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. And yeah, I'd rather be doing other things. And yeah, I have a short attention span. By the way, all those things could be true about me, not just my young son.
Right.
But it's more on the lines.
That's what I was taking it that way.
But it's more along the lines of, if I sit here and try to do this thing and I can't do it, failing isn't the problem. In almost any context, failing isn't the problem for people. It's the embarrassment associated with failing that's the problem. Or maybe for adults who might be a little bit more rational, it's the wasted time investment and the what do they call it? The cost. I could have been doing something else. I'm forgetting my words. I apologize.
Well, and if I'm slammed with spring breakers, my job in my head is to get you out the door. So go find some other accommodations. That's one less person in front of me that I have to worry about, which naturally is part of the job. Yeah, exactly.
And so for me at that point, I need to say, well, Gabe's supposed to not want to tie his shoes. She's supposed to not want to give me a room. Instead of me saying, well, I'm your dad, you need to do this, or I'm the customer, you're here to serve me. That's never been true ever. Their job is to do the minimum amount of required to say they serve the customer in case they get audited, but that's not actually enough to help the customer. So it's important in those situations in any conversation, to step back. And strategically for me, I'll bore you with this and then I'll pause again. If somebody ever comes to me and says, Mike, how do I get person X to say or do thing Y? I've got two sets of questions I'm going to follow up with. Set one is 3 questions. What are your goals? And there's a reasonable likelihood that what they think their goals aren't their goals. So we're going to workshop that until we figure out what the real goals are. Okay, cool. Who do you have to achieve those goals with? And that's not just the person or people you're going to talk to. There might be some other people tangentially involved here that we need to consider as this message flows. How are they going to react? How are they going to respond? So what are your goals? Who's involved? Who do you have to talk to? Who do you have to achieve them with? And what's the context of the situation? How long has this been going on? What's been tried before? So earlier you talked about working with people that have a history of drug use and have been in the criminal system. I think the safest assumption I've made all day is nobody's treated them well and given them the actual motivation to change their life's habits and decisions. I'm not saying they're not accountable for their life's habits and decisions, but the people that have been so-called there to help haven't helped. So for me, as part of the context of the situation, I want to know as much about that as possible, because that's going to set me up to answer the next 4 questions.
That's interesting, because in the treatment sphere, we find, especially in modern treatment, we kind of go in with the assumption of the presence of trauma and investigate that primarily with addiction being self-medication, right? And so that's very interesting because, if and this is where historically some people react well to this, but most people don't react well to the tough love dynamic, which is just, let's kick their ass a little bit. Well, they've had their ass kicked plenty, usually by the time they come to us, right? Including
the drugs are their coping mechanism.
Yes. Yeah.
So congratulations on giving them more motivation to shoot up. Job well done. Yeah, I agree. And trauma is a big word and it gets thrown around in a lot of different ways, but it gets back to understanding the context, what's behind a decision. Like if somebody, I've been fortunate enough to have conversations with people who've been in very unfortunate circumstances, if that's a good way and to say it, and you know better than me. But if somebody is too far down the drug hole, or pick a vice, any vice, right? Drugs, gambling, whatever, pick a vice. If they're too far down that hole, or God forbid, if they're on the edge of taking their own life, it's because there's a hole in their soul. There's a pain that is so bad, they can't figure out what to do with it. So until I can figure out how to address that, how's this coming from a non-licensed, non-therapist? But if I can't help them with that first, I ain't ever going to get to the truth in the next step. I'm going to get their coping behaviors. They've no doubt learned to tell me what they think I need to hear to get them back to where they can get to their previous behavior as fast as possible. So really what I want to focus on is with my preparation is the next 4 questions. So now that I've got the first 3 answered, I'm going to ask myself, why shouldn't they commit to what I want them to commit to? Not why should they? Because if I say why should they, I'm transposing my expectations onto them. That shoe probably won't fit. So I'm going to write down all the reasons I can think of why they shouldn't do the thing that I want them to say or do based on what I know about their history, the context of the situation, and how they perceive me and people in my role. Then the next question is, why haven't they already done it? And I'm going to try to workshop all the reasons I can think of, again, based on what I know, as to why they haven't already made the decision I want them to. And then, as we were making the AI jokes earlier, because I'm old school and I still use this thing called the pen on this thing called the pad of paper, I'm going to look down at my list. And the third question I'm going to ask myself is, what do they need to experience before they choose to say or do what I need them to say or do? And I'm going to look at all the reasons why they shouldn't and haven't already, and I'm going to build their experience off of that list. So instead of why am I so good at my job and why am I going to get them to, no, actually, hell no. It's let's start with all of the reasons why they probably shouldn't and haven't already. And then let me build a communication experience for them. Maybe that's one conversation. Maybe it's a series. Maybe it's with one person, me. Maybe it's with different people over a period of time. But how do I build that communication experience with them to give me the best chance at the outcome I need? And then the last question is just like a goal-oriented question. What's my goal and how will every step I take help me achieve that goal? I don't know about you, but sometimes I get so wrapped up in the strategy that I don't realize that I'm like 47 degrees off course by the time I'm done because I just got so wrapped up in creating it.
Right. Yeah.
So the last question is, what's my goal and how will every step help me achieve my goal? And that's just to make sure that I'm on the track I think I need to be on. And I know there's different overlapping ways to prepare for conversations. I've found whether it's interrogation, negotiation, sales, leadership, family conversations, large purchases, if I follow those 7 questions as a guideline, the likelihood of me having strategy and tactics that are going to get me where I need to be, when I need to be there, is on the money far more often than not.
It's interesting when we think of things in terms of negotiation, sales, trying to get to a certain goal. One of the things I see when I work with people with communication is that when we have a goal of getting somewhere, I want to get this to happen or even convince someone of something. One of the tools that is involved in what you're saying, I would say empathy, because you're kind of you're describing, and in fact, a deeper sort of empathy than just saying like, oh. You're actually talking about like, okay, who is this person and what do they need? Now, in some cases, it's not. You wouldn't think about that. I guess that word. I wouldn't think about it when it comes to like criminal interviews or anything like that. But then once again, a lot of these interviews or discussions that we're talking about are not going to be with the same goal of get them kind of thing. And I'm curious about that. When you adapt this and when you were writing the book, what kind of thoughts go into when someone is dealing with a relationship that's going to be an ongoing, hopefully collaborative, friendly relationship, a boss, a coworker, family member? You know, it's like we're not trying to just, okay, because even with sales, even if you're a really, kind, even if you're the kind of salesman who wants people to feel good and come back, you know what I mean? Rather than the one that just wants to sell the car and get you off the lot, and I don't care if it blows up 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you have that, how do you approach that? What do you have to keep in mind with those?
Now, let me confess to my bias right up front, right? My experience has been these techniques work substantially better in iterative relationships than one-off conversations. Because now think about the history that we have. Think about the additional context. Think about the trust. Think about the evidence I can give you for where we're going, the wins I can create for you along the way, the interactions between big conversations, casually passing you in the hall, following up on things, providing extra unsolicited, unexpected value along the way. So now when we apply these same techniques to iterative relationships over time, employees, customers, vendors, partners, family, the rewards continue to grow because now we have this base that we keep building from. And along that same line, we build trust equity. So when I inevitably screw something up, it's not Mike was trying to get one over on me. I've got months to years of positive experiences. So now this is an anomaly. It's an outlier. This isn't really Mike. So it's easier for me to recover from it at that point.
So it's kind of like that in a way. I'm thinking of somebody I knew years ago as a salesman who would talk about the high pressure sales versus the way he approached it, which is, I want you, he was a car salesman, but he's like, I want you to bring your kid to me when he needs a car, and your brother and your neighbor and things like that. I want, so I guess I'm hitting the sales thing a little bit, but what he had said to me, it was something I've always remembered about that field, which is, in there's that one school of thought that's like, good sales is like, we're trying to do something together. I'm not trying to trick you so that you'll hate me later or whatever, or feel taken advantage of. And I think when we talk about negotiating, people can get that in their head of like, oh, I'm trying to manipulate people. But what you're describing is, I mean, and I guess in a general sense of you are trying to get what you want, but you're not trying to do so. There's sort of a respect of what this other person's context is that seems to run through what you're describing.
For certain. And to touch on a couple of quick things here, the pressure and the manipulation, we'll kind of touch on both. One of the, I was going to say weird, but I guess it's a singular example that I feel like has a ripple effect for applications. For the types of interrogations that I did, my teammates and I did for the majority of my career when I was in that world were non-custodial, meaning people hadn't been Mirandized. They were free to get up and go anytime they wanted. We could not hold them in that room.
Right. You're not law enforcement. Right. I got you. Yeah.
Correct. And even when I was brought in on behalf of law enforcement, they're still non-custodial because once they get Mirandized, they can ask for a lawyer, and the cops don't want them to do that to me. So they're not going to Mirandize them. They're going to be free to leave when this conversation is over. So, and on top of that, we mostly interviewed cases where there were multiple suspects, no evidence, everybody had already been interrogated, nobody had confessed, and we're coming in a couple of weeks or months after everything went sideways. So one of the things that we ran into a lot less than people would probably think. I mean, if I had less than 10% of the interrogations I ever did this happen, that's a guesstimate, but I feel pretty confident with that. Somebody would say, I want to leave, or I'm going to go, or I don't have to sit here and listen to you, or you can't force me to sit here. And in every single one of those, I'm going to go. Go ahead. The door's right there. I don't have to sit here and listen to you. You're right. You don't. The door's right there. You can't make me sit here. You're right. I can't. I won't. If you want to get up and go, go. I'm done listening to you. I'm going to get up and leave. Well, thank you for sharing the time you did. Go right ahead. We'll continue on with the investigation. Telling people that they could leave made them stay. Whereas if they said, you can't make me stay here. Yes, I can. Don't get out of that chair. Now, not only am I breaking the law, but I'm motivating them to leave because I'm giving them a way to win. Mm-hmm. So often by not putting the pressure on people, we're managing their level of stress, which means we're managing their cortisol levels, which means we're keeping them open to the possibility of trusting us and thinking clearly and using their frontal lobe and bonding and all these things we need them to do in the conversation, which is extremely important. So that pressure versus non-pressure example you gave is very important. And because you didn't ask, my personal definition or thought on manipulation is manipulation itself is a neutral term. It's not good or bad. People generally think of it as bad, but if we're being honest, we manipulate people all day long. All day long. when you and I were saying hello at the start of this, we were manipulating each other to be ready to have a good, positive conversation. That doesn't make either one of us a bad person. That's how the world works.
If our goal is we want both of us to be comfortable in this situation, especially, right? And I very much like you. I think it's a benign, a term. We put an interpretation on it. When we say it, we usually mean malicious manipulation.
Correct.
Or selfish manipulation, right?
Yes. Which then comes down to intentions, techniques, the goals, what are we really focused on, and how aware are you that this could be happening to you? Mm-hmm. So if I have bad intentions, I'm using coercive techniques, you're not in any type of position to have any type of awareness that you're being manipulated, and the goal is good for me and bad for you, manipulation is bad. Mm-hmm. But if it's your average every day, I'm building rapport, I'm trying to get my son out the door on time for school, I'm meeting somebody new, I want my podcast host to be comfortable with me for the next 45 minutes. The intentions are solid. The techniques are open and honest. We're both aware of this and it's positive for both of us. So there's nothing wrong with manipulating each other. So for me, manipulation is very much neutral. And it's how and why we do it that, to use the obvious Star Wars analogy here, either put you on the right side or the dark side of the Force.
Very nice. Yes. Right. A great example, especially with May the 4th having, just we're right around there this time of year. and Andor season 2. Anyway, no, that's a great analogy too, I think, because you could literally look and say, "Oh, here's a Jedi mind trick," and they're tricking evil people, I guess, in the story. But basically, to use that for good or for evil might be kind of a dramatic term. But I think when we are working with people, it strikes me that if we're trying to do things the way you're describing, what we're doing is more likely to be benign or good for both people. And once again, in the majority of the ones we're talking about, we're not trying to arrest people. We're, most of us are very much trying to say, well, I'd like to negotiate a better salary, and that would theoretically be good for everybody, right? If I'm doing better, I'm going to stay here at the company, and if you value me, then, this and that. Or if I want to get a room, then, hey, you get a room booked that maybe wasn't otherwise. I'm actually really curious. I got to ask you if you got that room.
I did.
What'd you do?
So when I walk in, now I just flown from North Carolina to Arizona. So it's been a long day. I walk into the hotel, I give them my name, and she asks for it again with like an inquisitive look. So right away, I know I'm in trouble. So I stay calm because most people in a customer service situation get after whoever's not helping them. So I've got to be the opposite, right? Expectation, violation theory, whatever. So I get really calm, and she said, "Well, I can't find you." I said, "That's okay. It's no problem at all. Here's my client's name. I know they have a room block. Here's my host. Maybe it's under her name. Here's the other guy I'm working with. Maybe it's under his name. Take your time. No rush. It's okay." So I'm trying to depressure the situation and give as much factual information as I can that checks out.
And you're working together already, is what it sounds like. It's like, you're doing your job. Yeah, all right.
Honestly, I take half a step back away from the counter. I'm giving her space. I want her to feel safe, all of that stuff. So she goes through and says, "I don't have you. I have all of them, but I don't have you." And my immediate response to her is, "Okay, thank you for checking." You'd be surprised how often you thank somebody for doing something that's not in your favor and how well that works for you. I said, "Thank you for checking. I really appreciate that. So I'm happy to pay for a room. Please walk me through the process of what I need to do to pay for a room." Walk me through the process is my favorite question to ask. Mm-hmm. She immediately looks at me and says, "We're sold out. I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do." So at that point in time, I just said, "Thank you," grabbed my suitcase and walked back out the front door because she just took a position. So I'm not going to fight her off of that position right now. So the first thing I did was I texted my contact just to make sure like I'm not missing a detail. They're not texting me back. So okay, I'll go handle this myself. I do believe that for many of us, it's easier to stay calm and negotiate from a perceived position of strength, even though you should never show it. So before I went back in to start this process, I turned on the hotspot on my phone, I opened my laptop, and I found 2 hotels with room availability within a mile of where I was standing at that moment. So it's not where I want to stay, but I know I have a bed. So there's no need for me to be, not that it would help, but now I can, instead of getting angry and pushing, I can be calm. So I walk back in and I wait in line for the other associate, not for her. And when I walk up to him and he gives me the, hey, how can I help you? I looked at him and I said, honestly, I'm not sure that you can, and that's okay. And he said, well, why? What's going on? I said, well, my name's Michael Reddington. I'm supposed to have a reservation here for the next 2 nights. Here's the organization I'm working with. I know they have a room block here. When I came in earlier and I gestured at her, I said she was extremely nice. She looked everywhere. She validated the other names were here and that there's not a room for me. That happens sometimes. But she let me know that the building is sold out tonight. So really, I would be grateful if you could please walk me through the process of who I need to speak to in order to secure whatever room is being held back in case of emergency. And he gives me, well, let me see if I can help. I give him all the same information. He comes back with all the same answers. And I can see these two looking at each other because she knows I'm back, which is why I went out of my way to compliment her because I don't want them going in the back room and have her being like, I already told him now, get him out of here. Yeah. Right? So he says, well, let me see what I can do for you. He goes in the back. While he's in the back, I get all the way to the confirmation page of my backup hotel. So the second he comes back and says, I'm sorry, sir, I have tried everything. There's a reasonable likelihood at this point they have. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I'm going to thank him. I'm going to book this room and get my Uber to come back and get me and take me over to this other hotel. It took maybe 10 minutes. I don't want to over exaggerate, but he came back to me and leaned over and whispered, said, Mr. Reddington, thank you for your patience. We were able to find you a room for tonight. If you can give me 5 more minutes, I just need the right code and I'll get you in. And they did. And honestly, they offered, they honored the same rate that the room block would have had without me asking. They could have charged me more, which my client would have paid for anyway, to be honest. So that's okay. But so that, almost word for word is the process I use with maybe a 7 or 8 minute break when I went outside and came back in. But by giving people the opportunity to save face, taking the easy no's away from them, providing them with the context of the situation, building rapport, being friendly, being helpful, asking questions that don't shut doors but open doors. Please walk me through the process. Telling them up front, if you can't help me, that's okay. All of these things set me up to be successful in that conversation instead of doing the, damn it, I'm a customer and you owe me a room. That's not going to work.
Yeah, right. Well, right.
Or they're going to give me the room that they know hasn't been cleaned in 3 days.
By the ice machine. Isn't that the old? Yeah. That's one of the things that it hits is that I think, you're using those skills to essentially reinforce like being a respectful human being in the communication. But I mean, to me, there's a large part there that if I'm in a customer service position and someone is nice to me, then I kind of want to help already. Right. And I wonder if there is that drive, like you say, we have a drive to distrust. But then once we have that kind of trust and rapport, I think we want to connect. I think there's a human desire to connect that you're kind of like using and not abusing. And that's the key that I really like about your work and your principles is that it's using these skills, but not abusing people. And I think all too often when people make their whole deal about negotiating and getting people to do what you want, it turns into, here's how you manipulate in a way that doesn't care about the other person. And I like that element that you have there of the empathy and caring about their context. Because also more effective. Not only is it a nicer thing to do, but it's more effective.
It's way more effective. Yeah. And I say it kind of jokingly, but it's true. You will be surprised what people can say and do for you when you're nice to them, especially when they don't expect you to be nice to them based on the context of the situation and how they've been operationally conditioned in their life before. For me, whenever I had to interrogate people that were familiar with the system, I was super nice to them. Because nobody they've dealt with before in a similar capacity to me was ever nice to them. Mm-hmm. So by me being super nice to them right away, they're like, yo, why is this dude being so nice to me? And now I've got their attention. And because many people, well, I want to be careful with how I say this. For a lot of people in those types of situations, respect and fear are synonymous. And so now if I'm showing them respect, but the fear element is absent, we can have a human-to-human conversation. And now they're telling me things that they've never told another investigator before because we basically flanked them. They had a prepared defense. You're going to treat me like a piece of crap. I can't wait. And this is how I'm going to bow up on you. Oh, damn. He respects me. I'm not so sure what to do about that. Oh, yeah. Here's everything I did. And here's all the people that I did it with. You want me to write it down for you? I'm being a little bit sarcastic. It's obviously
No,
not that.
I agree. It's funny how much the lack and I think in these situations you have to go out of your way to communicate a lack and to create a lack of aggression, a lack of
Yeah.
insecurity, a lack
Yep.
of intimidation also. So there's a little bit of standing up for yourself and being assertive, but no trace of like I'm going to force and bully my way in. There was a weird little memory that just popped in my head. I had a colleague once. We were at an agency where we both worked kind of part-time in the evenings. So we're kind of like waiting there, and it coincided that we're both waiting at the secretarial station and neither of our clients were there. And it was around time of an election. And this is several elections ago. I'm going to put it, this is probably 10, well, I don't remember, whatever. It was several elections ago. It doesn't really matter. But at some point I realized, he asked me a question about who was voting for or something. And you're like, oh, here we go. But the interesting thing was this guy had no trace of insecurity and he had no trace of anger at the fact that, as it turned out, had a very different outlook than he did. And we ended up talking for like 45 minutes in one of the few and one of the most satisfying political discussions I've had with a person who's just like not threatened at all by the fact that we disagree and actually interested, right? And so it was fun. Neither of us was trying to get to a certain perspective at that time, but except that we were trying to understand each other, and that felt pretty cool. And all of a sudden I wanted to participate in this discussion that usually I would go to great lengths to avoid. Unless I'm yelling at people on social media, of course.
Because that's what social media was invented for.
Right, exactly.
Especially when you get tricked into yelling with a robot and you don't even realize it's not a real person.
Right, yeah, exactly.
There's a story, and I put the nuts and bolts of it in the book, because I didn't want to bore people with all the details, but I had the opportunity to teach in the Middle East for several weeks, and I was in Jordan, and I had a local driver who took me down to the Dead Sea. And so here I am on the edge of the Dead Sea in Jordan, looking at Israel with I come to find out, a Palestinian driver. And my driver, who up until then I'd had a pretty good relationship with, asks me what religion I was. And I'm thinking, well, this feels like a pretty good way to get killed from my American Christian limited point of view, right? Okay. And so I start sort of like deflecting the answers. And finally, he looks at me and says, American, you can tell me the truth. And I looked at him, I'm like, not if you call me American. Like, that's not helping. And so we end up leaning on the hood of his car. And I tell him, I was raised Christian. And well, the next thing you know, within about 5 minutes, he tells me that his family is from Palestine. And he is pointing like over the Dead Sea, and he's telling me how they still have olive groves that they believe are theirs and all this other stuff. So his family was removed from there. I know today's politics are very different, so I'm not trying to touch on any live wires, retelling of a story. But to even use that as a backdrop, within about 5 minutes, we were talking about similarities, and I'm no theologian or whatever that called, theologist, whatever. They're
all good to me. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But the similarities between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And at the end of that conversation, he looks at his watch and says, we have time. In a very short version of a very long story, he took me to a town that had a mosque and a Greek Orthodox church right next to it, with the goal of going into both together. We couldn't get into the mosque because there was a service, but when we went into the Greek Orthodox church, they had recently done some renovation and found the oldest known mosaic map of the Holy Land in the floor. I've got a picture of it. You can see my toes like in the picture to prove that I was there. And like I think that it was a 2,000-something-year-old mosaic. I can go back and look it up and find it. But to use your example, like had we not given ourselves the opportunity to understand each other, I don't walk away with that experience.
And that's
he didn't have to do anything for me. Yeah. He'd been paid up front.
Yeah. Interesting. And he just wanted to when it was safe to do so. Wow. Well, this is I really appreciate the time that you're taking to tell about this. The book is The Disciplined Listening Method, How a Certified Forensic Reviewer Unlocks Hidden Value in Every Conversation. I want to tell people how the best place they can get it and where they can follow your work. Real quick before that, I always like to ask everyone on the show if they can share something with the audience as a way of giving back to the community. It could be a nonprofit, it could be any kind of a charity that's near and dear to your heart. Is there anything you could share with the listeners today?
Yeah, I've got several. I'm probably going to forget a few and upset some people, so I apologize in advance. But here in North Carolina, where I live, we've got a very close relationship with Turning Point, which is an organization that is a shelter and educational group for victims of physical and sexual abuse. So I have
Wonderful
a
program.
strong,
Yeah.
yeah, strong relationship with them. Um, I mean, I could go on and on. There's Union Diversified Industries here that I work with, and they focus on employing people with developmental disabilities and other special needs. I got a close relationship with the YMCA. That's a bigger one that a lot of people have heard of. Now that you put me on the spot, I know that I'm forgetting some. There's several food banks here. Special Olympics, of course, in my background in special education. So for me, if there are a group of people who are honestly and sincerely serving the disadvantaged or those that don't have the opportunity to take care of themselves, then please support them.
Wonderful. And that's the key I always look for when we highlight charities on here as well. Well, where do people find you?
I appreciate you asking. Thank you. So the book is available on both Barnes and Noble and Amazon. So if you're whichever is your preference, The Disciplined Listening Method, How a Certified Forensic Interviewer Unlocks Hidden Value in Every Conversation. You can find it on both. If you want to learn more about it first, you can go to disciplinedlistening.com and you can sample the book and look into the research and all that there. If you're looking to learn more about me, you can go to michaelreddington.com. If anyone's interested in the work that our company does, the programs that we are asked by our clients to facilitate for their leaders and sales teams and negotiation teams and whatnot, that's at inquasive.com, INQUASIVE.com. And if you want to connect with me personally, LinkedIn is the only social media I'm on. So you can find me at Michael Reddington CFI. Please tell me you heard me here, and I'd be very happy to connect and carry on a conversation with you too.
The professional social media. Very good. Very good.
Ish.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of ish nowadays everywhere. Quick, this is one quick plug to everybody, just so you know, the monthly charity that we're highlighting here on the show is Grand View for Good, which is a new nonprofit actually started by my colleague Holly Willard, who's a clinical social worker and therapist, and they are working to increase mental health advocacy and appreciation, as well as looking to start fundraising and doing things to help those who cannot afford therapy and mental health treatment to be able to do so. So if people want to go to grandviewforgood.org, and with that, as well as any of the charities that you just mentioned, I always like to highlight that if you have time or you have the funding and the capacity to donate, always a good thing to do. If you do not have either of those available, it does not cost anything while you're scrolling around on whichever thing you're scrolling around on. Never costs anything to share a link or to text it to a few people and say, hey, do you know about this? This is cool. So, gosh, Michael, it's been such a pleasure, and good luck in all the stuff that you're doing and with the book, and just thank you for the work you're doing.
I appreciate you having me, man. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.
No one hates history, they just haven't found the right teacher yet. Or in this case, a nerdy best friend who loves to tell you all about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hi, I'm TK, the creator of For the Love of History podcast, a place for people who want to learn more but don't know where to start, and history lovers who want to break from the mainstream. From rat trials to warrior women, we cover topics from every country and era. Whether you're a history expert or just starting out, there's a place for you here in the Time Machine. So join me every Friday on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for a brand new topic. See you there. Bye.